Hello there, this is Mr. Truin and welcome to Week 7, Term 1 in review for 5T. One of the things we did in English this week was we went back to basics with comprehension, and we had a very important class discussion on what it means to comprehend what we read. We talked about the idea that quite often when we read, we switch off, and yet we continue to read. So we talked about what causes us to shut off and continue to read, and discovered that it was actually the language, the words, that caused this to happen. We've found that it's really important to find books that aren't too difficult, and yet books that aren't too simple. Reading books because they're easy to read won't challenge you, and they won't help your literacy skills to develop. So the key to successful comprehension is to make sure you realise when it is that you don't understand what you're reading. So when you come across words that you don't understand, and either try to find out what certain words mean, or if it's in a more relaxed setting, find an easier book. This week in HSIE, we continue to look at people of the rainforest. We discussed how fair it is that tribes are being relocated and sometimes wiped out for the purpose of taking resources from rainforests to use for products. We talked about the fact that most of our houses are made up of these very products, but looked at, again, the impact that this has directly on those who live in the rainforests. The class went on to have a very interesting discussion about our own Australian Indigenous population and the ways in which they've been affected by development here in our country. Next week, we will have our last week of looking at rainforests, and we'll look specifically at what we can do to minimise environmental consequences. This week we celebrated Ash Wednesday with a Mass at school. Ash Wednesday marks the beginning of Lent, and Lent is seen as a special time in our church and our school community where we think about the mystery of Jesus' life and death. We also think about how we can grow to be more loving by following Jesus' way. This week in mathematics we focused on perimeter. Perimeter is the distance around the outside of a shape. It's the total length of all the sides. The perimeter of a shape can be found by adding the lengths of the sides together. In our metric system, we measure perimeter in millimetres, centimetres, metres or kilometres. To calculate perimeter, we find the sum of the sides, which means to add the lengths of every side which forms the shape. When calculating the perimeter, we need to take care to ensure that each of the given sides are measured in the same units. So if we start measuring in centimetres, we need to stick with centimetres. If for some reason the sides are shown in different measurements, such as millimetres, say, and centimetres, we need to convert them and turn them all into the same unit of measurement. We often need to convert between units of length. We might want to know the distance of a running course in metres instead of kilometres, or perhaps the length of a book in millimetres instead of centimetres. When we need to convert, we do one of either two things. We either multiply or we divide. The metric system's based on multiples of 10. So when we convert between different units of measurement and multiply or divide, we're always looking at that magic number of 10. Converting between different units of measurement in mathematics is often seen as a very complex thing to do. The two key things to remember are that if you're converting from a larger unit to a smaller unit, then you need to multiply. If you're converting from a smaller unit to a larger unit, you divide. Once again, larger to smaller, multiply, smaller to larger, divide. An example of such a conversion would be if you were asked to convert 9 kilometres into metres. Straight away you ask yourself, am I going from a larger to a smaller unit or vice versa? And we are in fact going from a larger unit being kilometres to a smaller unit being metres. So we multiply. We say 9, as in 9 kilometres, times 1,000 because there are 1,000 metres in kilometres. So we say 9 times 1,000 and the answer is 9,000 metres. This week in health, we looked at how we can communicate effectively. As a class, we discussed what makes a good listener, and things that were mentioned included facial expression to show that you're following along, our posture, making eye contact, and using physical non-verbal gestures. We looked at how do you know when someone's listening to you, and we spoke of ways to demonstrate active listening, such as prompting questions, laughing in the right place, commenting, nodding, all of those sorts of things. From there, we went on to talk about the sort of behaviours that we may display that can break down communication, and a couple of examples of those were interrupting someone while they're speaking, changing the subject before you've sort of finalised a certain topic, or maybe joking around at an inappropriate time.